Next we're going to look at creating a turret and bullets for it to fire. Now, the way that weapons, turrets work inside Unreal is very different to how they work in real life. Instead of the gun or turret itself projecting a bullet out of the gun, it simply spawns a bullet in front of the turret or gun that's actually in the game world. So to start this process, we're going to start with the bullet itself. Just cancel that out. So what we're going to do is go into our blueprints folder, and we're going to add a new blueprint class. We'll make it an actor and just call it a bullet. Now open that up. Now the very first thing we're going to add is the hitbox for this bullet. So click on add component, and we're going to type in sphere collision and call that hitbox. Now we want this hitbox, this sphere collision, to be the root of this blueprint. So just simply hold left click and move it onto the default scene root, and I'll make it the root itself then. Now I'm going to add a static mesh, and this static mesh is going to be my bullet. So I'm going to call it bullet. Now I'm just going to make something that looks similar to a blaster bolt from Star Wars. So just it'll be a sphere which is stretched out and made quite thin. So imagine this small spherical object which is like a blaster bolt from Star Wars. So for the static mesh, I'm going to add a sphere, and it'll be shaped sphere. I'm just going to make this more of an appropriate size. So let's say about there, quite like that. Make it a little bit thinner. Not that thin. We'll say about there. So if you're going to replicate something that I'm doing here, I'm going to use around about 0.5 for the X and Y axes, and then I can stretch this out. I think that's about what I'm going to say for the blaster bolt size. Now, I'm moving this bullet into the center because you can't move your scene, your blueprint's root, the sphere collision, once it's set as the root. What you can do though, over in here, is change the radius. I'm going to pull that right down because you don't want your hitbox for your bullet being drastically bigger than the bullet itself. Otherwise you'll think that you're going to dodge the bullet and it'll actually still hit you. So that's a little bit bigger, but that'll do. Now you want the hitbox to be the first thing that really hits your player. So I'm going to pull this back to around about here, because if this part of the bullet misses you, odds are the back's also going to miss you. You're not going to walk into the edge of the bullet because it'll be moving too fast. So I'm going to compile that quickly and have a look at how big that is in the actual game world. Put it in. That looks a little big. So that is actually quite big, but for now, I'm going to leave it as that, especially for testing purposes, so we can at least see how the bullet is acting. Afterwards we can make it a little bit smaller, and that'll be fine. So obviously right then the bullet wasn't moving, it wasn't firing, it was just sitting there. So let's add some movement to it. Now in your bullet blueprint, just add component and type in projectile movement, and you can see this here. We can keep the name as it is. So click on your projectile movement, and you can see all these options over here. So I'm going to start by setting the initial and the max speed, so it's instantly moving. I'm going to say 200, which is going to be quite slow, but it'll be good for testing purposes. So I've set both the initial and max speeds to 200, and this one here, projectile gravity scale, I'm going to set to 0. Now that controls how much gravity affects your bullet. 1 is normal earth gravity, so it'll drop as a normal bullet would. 0 means there is no gravity, so this should just go forward and should keep going forward. So let's have a look. There it goes. And because I haven't coded anything in that yet, that's going to just keep going forever. So let's have a quick look here. Now if you move this to the left, so it's going to collide with the building here, and play that, it goes straight through. It should keep going through. There you go, out it comes. So there isn't actually any collision in it yet. So let's change that. Back into the bullet blueprint, and we're going to click on the hitbox, because this is what we want to actually overlap and trigger something. So in the right side, if you scroll down until you get to this collision area here, Now I'd like you to change the collision preset from overlap all dynamic to custom. And then you get a bigger range of things that you can choose. Now I'm going to actually tell it to block everything. So if you click the very top block here, it blocks all of these. And the only ones we're going to untick is the world dynamic and the port. So buildings and us. Click compile, and now let's have a look what happens. So let's try that again. The bullet went past me, hit the wall, and it's stuck in the wall a little bit. Now if you're using things like arrows or anything that you fire, that wouldn't necessarily be that bad of a thing, but I want mine to be a blaster bolt, so it shouldn't really do that. So let's change that as well. I will quickly, before moving on, quickly go into your bullet as well, sorry. And for the collisions for your bullet, just change it from the collision preset from block all to overlap all, because you don't want the bullet actually triggering anything, just the hitbox. Okay, into your event graph, and I'm going to get rid of begin play and active begin overlap, and we're going to use the tick. Now, if the bullet hits something, it's going to immediately stop, and if that happens, I want the bullet to delete itself. So I'm going to start by saying get velocity, which will get the blueprint's velocity. We'll get that vector's length, so vector length. There you go. Now, if the length of this velocity is smaller than, let's say, less than 10, so if it's stopped, attach that to a branch. And if the velocity length is less than 10, we simply just wanted to destroy the actor. Destroy actor. So let's give that a go. Compile. And now instead, when this hits the wall, perfect, it just deleted itself straight away. Now normally, under normal circumstances, that bullet's going to be moving a lot quicker, so you won't notice it just disappearing in one swoop. You can also add particle effects to it later on, but for now that'll work perfectly. However, if that bullet hits me, let's try again. I'm not sure if that just went through me, if it just didn't hit me. Nothing really happens. And if nothing really happens, there's not really much point in a bullet happening, so let's add some collision there. So what I'd like to do is right click on the hitbox, add event, and on component begin overlap. Now if that hitbox overlaps something, we're going to cause something to happen. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to check it's actually the player that is hitting. So we're going to cast to player character. You'll have to make sure that that is your player character, so just double check, go backwards, go find your character, and mine's called player character there. If you've called yours anything else, make sure it's that. Back to the bullet. We're going to plug the other actor in, and if it casts the player character correctly, we're just going to launch the character. Launch character. Now this is just going to add some form of velocity to my character. I'm going to plug as player character in there. And we're going to get a launch velocity here. We're going to make it dependent on the bullet itself. So I'm going to get this get velocity, which we've already used once. And I'm going to pull a strand down here, and we're going to just type in add, and we're going to use vector plus vector. And we'll just add, let's say, 200 to the Z axis. So when that hits us, it's going to make our character jump a little bit, just to show us that we've been hit. And plug that into the launch velocity. Give that a go. Let's move it back a little bit so it's a little bit easier to hit me. There you go. It's hit me, and it kept hitting me until it hit the wall and then disappeared. So the last thing I'm going to do is just quickly add another one and say destroy actor. So it hits me, adds a bit of velocity, and destroys itself. Nice and easy. Let's try that again. Have a quick look. Here it comes, and there you go. It hits me a little bit and then destroys itself. That's perfect. Now the last thing I'm going to quickly do, because this doesn't really look much like a bullet, I'm going to go into my materials. I'm going to create a new material called bullet glow. I'm going to very quickly set up a glowing material for this bullet. Glow over 25, let's say. Plug that in there and into emissive. And we're just going to make it glow nice and red. So I'm going to add that glow to my bullet. glow, perfect. Compile. Let's have a look how that looks. There you go, and there's my red bullet glowing towards me and hits me, makes my character jump. Perfect. Okay, so if you could replicate those steps, make sure your code looks like my code looks like, and ensure that your bullet is working correctly before moving on to the next video.